In the heart of Kibula village, where the sun painted the skies gold and the earth cracked under the dry season's heat, a boy named Jomo returned home. But Jomo was no longer a boy. At 18, he had spent 5 years in the city, sent by his mother to learn and grow, to become a man. Now, he had returned to a village that had changed, and so had he. The compound where he grew up stood large and proud, built from red clay and thick wood. It used to echo with the voices of men, fathers, uncles, brothers. But the war had stolen them all, leaving behind only silence and women. The men of Kibula had gone far away to fight, and few returned. Jomo's father was among the missing. As he walked through the gate of the compound, carrying a small bag over his shoulder, dust swirled at his feet. The air smelled of smoke, roasted maize, and earth. The village children watched him with wide eyes. The women whispered, their eyes following his every move. He was now the only man in the household. Waiting for him at the entrance was his mother, Ao, her face strong but softened with emotion. Behind her stood the housekeeper, Mama Sesi, who had cared for Jomo like her own son. Alongside them was his cousin, Lina, a young woman with fire in her eyes. The maids, Tandy and Nola, stood nearby, their hands dusty from work. "Welcome home, my son," Ao said, her voice steady. "Welcome, Jomo," the others echoed. Jomo smiled, stepping forward. He greeted them one by one, bowing his head in respect. But as his eyes met theirs, he felt something new, something strange. The house was alive with women, but there was a tension, like the charged air before a storm. That evening, the compound came alive for a feast. The women had prepared fufu, spicy goat stew, and sweet fried plantains. The courtyard glowed with lantern light, and the scent of food made Jomo's stomach growl. Laughter filled the air, and the women sang songs of joy, welcoming him back. Jomo sat at the center of the feast, a position once held by his father. As he ate, he noticed something, the way Mama Sesi's eyes lingered on him, the way Lina laughed softly at his every word, the way Tandy's hands trembled slightly as she poured him water. It wasn't just a homecoming. It was something else. When the food was finished, and the plates were cleared, the women moved about the courtyard, their voices soft, their eyes stealing glances at Jomo. But Mama Sesi remained seated beside him, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "You've changed, Jomo," she said quietly, her voice smooth like honey. "You are no longer a child." Jomo swallowed, feeling the weight of her gaze. Mama Sesi had always been like a second mother, but tonight, she seemed different. Her eyes held curiosity, warmth, and something else, a quiet fire. "Yes, Mama," he replied, unsure of his own voice. "I have learned much." She smiled, a soft, slow smile. "I can see that." That night, as the house grew quiet, Jomo lay on his mat, staring at the ceiling. The sounds of the night, crickets, rustling leaves, the soft hoot of an owl, filled the air. But Jomo's mind was restless. He thought of Mama Sesi's words, of Lina's laughter, of Tandy's shy smile. He was the only man in the house. And somehow, that meant something now, something he did not yet understand. As sleep finally took him, the wind blew gently through the compound, whispering secrets that only the night could hear. Jomo had returned to find peace, but in Kibula, peace was not what awaited him. The morning sun rose over Kibula village, casting golden light on the compound. Roosters crowed in the distance, and smoke curled from cooking fires. Jomo stepped out into the yard, stretching his arms. The air was cool and fresh, but something in his chest felt heavy, an ache he could not name. As he walked towards the well to wash his face, he saw Tandy, the young maid, carrying a pot on her head. Her eyes met his, and she blushed deeply, quickly lowering her gaze. "Good morning, Jomo," she whispered. "Good morning, Tandy," he replied, offering a smile. But she said nothing more, only hurried away, leaving behind the sweet scent of lemongrass soap. In the kitchen, Mama Ceci was already at work, pounding yam with strong arms. She looked up as Jomo entered, wiping sweat from her brow. "You slept well?" she asked, her tone gentle. "I did, Mama," Jomo replied, though he had tossed and turned most of the night. Mama Ceci nodded, her eyes studying him closely. She handed him a bowl of water. "You've grown tall," she said, her hand brushing his shoulder as she passed. "Your father would be proud." Jomo felt the warmth of her touch linger. Her hand had been firm, her fingers slow to pull away. There was something new in her voice, not the voice of a caregiver, but of a woman seeing him differently. That afternoon, Lina, Jomo's cousin, invited him to walk to the market. "The sun is kind today," she said, smiling. "Let's go see what the traders brought." Jomo agreed, and they walked side by side along the dusty road, past waving palms and curious villagers. Lina was cheerful, laughing easily, but Jomo noticed her walking close, her arm sometimes brushing his. At the market, she stopped at a cloth stall and held up a bright blue wrap. "What do you think?" she asked, spinning in place, the cloth fluttering around her legs. Jomo laughed. "It suits you." Her eyes locked with his. "Do you really think so?" For a moment, the noise of the market faded. Lina's gaze was deep, and Jomo felt a spark, a strange warmth. "We should go," he said, looking away. Lina didn't speak, but her smile was knowing. That evening, another feast was held. The compound was alive with light and music. Women from nearby homes joined in, bringing gifts and greetings. But Jomo felt out of place, the only man among so many women. He sat at the head of the table again, as his father once had. Tandy served him food, her hands trembling. She spilled a little stew, gasping. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. Jomo reached out, touching her hand to calm her. "It's fine, Tandy," he said softly. She looked up at him with wide, unsure eyes, and something passed between them, a moment neither could explain. As the night wore on, the laughter became softer, the shadows deeper. Jomo noticed the women's eyes on him, Lina's smile, Mama Ceci's gentle touch, Tandy's quiet glances. He felt the air grow thick, like a storm was coming. When the feast ended, the women moved inside, but Mama Ceci stayed behind. She sat beside him, the lantern casting soft light on her face. "You've become a man, Jomo," she said, her voice low. Jomo swallowed. "I'm still learning." She leaned closer. "Some lessons are not taught in the city." Her eyes searched his face. Then, after a pause, she stood and left, her words hanging in the air like a question without an answer. That night, as Jomo lay in bed, he heard a soft knock. "Who is it?" he whispered. "It's me," came Lina's voice. Jomo's heart pounded. He opened the door, and Lina stepped inside, her bare feet silent on the floor. "I couldn't sleep," she said, sitting beside him. Her voice was soft, her eyes full of memories. "Do you remember when we played by the river?" she asked. Jomo nodded. "We used to hide from the elders," she said, her fingers brushing his arm. The touch sent a shiver through him. "You've changed, Jomo," she whispered. "You're not a boy anymore." He looked at her, his breath shallow. Neither of them spoke. Silence wrapped around them, thick and heavy. Lina smiled, her hand resting on his. "Good night, Jomo," she said, rising and slipping out. Jomo sat in the dark, his heart racing. Something was happening. Something he could no longer ignore. Days passed in Kibula village, but for Jomo, time felt strange. The compound was alive with women, yet it felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls were closing in around him. He couldn't ignore the looks, the touches, the way each woman seemed to be playing a silent game. A game with no rules. Mama Ceci had always been strong, strict, like a second mother. But now, her voice was softer, her eyes lingering longer. She found excuses to touch him, a hand on his back, her fingers brushing his hand when passing him a cup. One afternoon, Jomo helped her carry water from the river. The sun burned above, and the path was dry and uneven. As they reached the compound gate, Mama Ceci stumbled, her foot catching on a rock. Jomo caught her quickly, the water jar slipping, but she was safe in his arms. For a moment, they didn't move. Her face was close to his, her breath warm on his neck. "You've grown strong," she whispered, her eyes searching his face. Jomo's heart beat fast. He could feel her body pressed against him, soft yet firm. His arms trembled, not from the weight, but from the moment. Mama Ceci slowly pulled away, her cheeks red. I should go," she said, picking up the jar and walking quickly toward the house. Jomo stood frozen, the touch of her skin still burning on his own. That night, as the moon rose high, Jomo sat under the big baobab tree, staring at the stars. "Still awake?" came Lina's voice. She walked over, wearing a simple cloth wrap, her hair loose around her shoulders. Jomo nodded, unsure what to say. Lina sat beside him, close, too close. "You've been quiet," she said, her eyes shining in the moonlight. "Thinking about me?" Jomo laughed nervously. "I've been thinking about everything." Lina's hand rested on his knee. "You don't have to think so hard," she whispered. "Sometimes, you just feel." Her fingers moved gently, her touch soft and electric. Jomo's breath caught. The night was silent except for crickets and the pounding of his heart. But Lina didn't stay long. She leaned in, kissed his cheek, and stood. "Good night, Jomo," she said with a playful smile, disappearing into the house. Jomo sat in the darkness, his mind spinning. The next morning, Tandy, the quiet maid, approached him as he fetched firewood. "Can I help?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jomo nodded, and they walked in silence, the air thick between them. As he handed her a bundle of sticks, their fingers touched briefly, and she gasped, pulling her hand away. "I'm sorry," she murmured, looking at the ground. "Tandy, it's fine," Jomo said gently. But when she looked up at him, there was a new look in her eyes, hope, fear, and something else. Jomo realized then, Tandy wasn't just shy. She was watching. Waiting. That night, as Jomo sat alone by the fire, he felt the weight of the compound settle on his shoulders. He was the only man here. Each woman, Mama Ceci, Lina, Tandy, was pulling at him, in different ways, for different reasons. The boundaries that once separated family from desire were starting to fade. Jomo didn't know what would happen next. But he knew one thing for sure. Something had begun. And there was no turning back. The full moon rose over Kibula, casting silver light on the compound. The air was still, thick with heat, and the smell of firewood and palm oil drifted on the breeze. Jomo sat alone in his room, the lamp flickering beside him. His thoughts were restless. He could feel it coming, the moment when everything would change. A soft knock broke the silence. Jomo's heart raced. "Who is it?" he whispered. "It's me," came Mama Ceci's voice, low, almost trembling. Jomo hesitated for a moment, then stood and opened the door. She stood there, wrapped in a simple cloth, her shoulders bare, her face glowing in the soft light of the moon. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. "I couldn't sleep," she said softly, stepping inside. The door closed quietly behind her. "You've been different, Mama Ceci," Jomo said, his voice low. "I know," she replied, her eyes locked on his. "And so have you." She stepped closer, reaching out to touch his chest, her fingers light and slow. "I've tried to stay away," she continued, her hand now resting over his heartbeat. But I can't pretend anymore. Her voice shook, but her hand was steady. You are not a boy, Jomo. You are a man. Jomo's breath quickened. He could feel the heat rising between them, the kind that could not be ignored. I don't know what to do, he whispered. Mama Ceci stepped even closer, her face just inches from his. Then let me show you, she said. Their lips met, soft at first, hesitant, as if both were unsure. But the moment deepened. The years of tension, the unspoken desires, and the longing hidden in glances and touches all came rushing out like a flood. Jomo felt her hand slide over his shoulders, pulling him closer, her breath warm against his skin. The room disappeared. There was no past. No future. Just the now, the fire between them. Mama Ceci guided him to the bed, her eyes never leaving his. She moved with deliberate care, and he followed her lead, their bodies finding a rhythm of their own. That night was unlike anything Jomo had ever known. Not just because of what they did, but because of how it changed everything. When morning came, Mama Ceci was gone from his room. The sheets still held her scent, and the silence in the air was heavier than ever before. Jomo sat on the edge of his bed, heart pounding, mind spinning. What had happened was real. There was no going back. Later that day, Lina found him in the garden, sitting under the baobab tree. She walked over, a knowing smile on her face. You look different, she teased, sitting beside him. Jomo said nothing. Lina leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Did she come to you last night? Jomo turned to her, startled. She laughed softly. I knew it. I could feel it in the air. Lina's eyes were bright, full of mischief and desire. Don't worry, she said, her fingers brushing his arm. My turn will come. The days in Kibula seemed to move slower now. For Jomo, the compound no longer felt like home, it felt like a cage, filled with whispers, touches, and hidden looks. Since the night with Mama Ceci, everything had changed. She barely spoke to him, her eyes darting away whenever he came near. But in those brief moments, Jomo saw the truth, a shared secret that weighed heavily between them. Yet it wasn't over. Not even close. One afternoon, Lina found Jomo alone, chopping wood near the back of the compound. Sweat covered his skin, and his muscles strained with every swing of the axe. You work too hard, Lina teased, her voice smooth like honey. Jomo looked up. She was wearing a bright cloth wrap, her skin glowing in the sunlight. I like to stay busy, he replied, wiping his brow. Lina stepped closer, her eyes locked onto his. Busy hands, strong hands, she whispered, reaching out and touching his arm. Jomo tensed. Lina, what are you doing? She smiled, her hand slowly tracing the curve of his bicep. I've been waiting for this, she said softly. Since the day you returned. Jomo tried to step back, but Lina was quick. She moved close, her lips brushing his ear. I know what happened with Mama Ceci, she whispered. And I want my turn. His heart pounded. He felt trapped, caught between desire and guilt. But Lina didn't wait. She grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the storeroom at the side of the compound. Inside, the air was warm and still, filled with the smell of clay, herbs, and wood. Lina pressed Jomo against the wall, her eyes burning with fire. I want you, Jomo, she said. No more games. Before he could respond, her lips were on his, fierce and demanding. Jomo tried to resist, but his body betrayed him. He pulled her close, their bodies locking together in a dance that had no rhythm, only heat. Lina was bold, her hands exploring, her voice low with need. Time melted away, leaving only their breaths, their movements, and the sound of their hearts beating like drums. When it was over, they stood in silence, sweat on their skin, the air heavy. Lina smiled. You belong to me now, too, she whispered, stepping into the light and leaving Jomo alone in the shadows. Later that evening, as the sky turned orange and the birds returned to their nests, Jomo sat by the fire, trying to make sense of everything. His head ached with thoughts he couldn't quiet. That's when Tandy approached, barefoot, nervous, her eyes red. "Jomo, can I sit with you?" she asked. He nodded, moving aside. She sat down slowly, her hands twisting the edge of her dress. "I've watched you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jomo turned to her, confused. "What do you mean?" "I see how you are with Mama Ceci. With Lina. I see how they look at you." Jomo stayed silent, guilt rising in his chest. Tandy looked up, her eyes shining with tears. "I don't have their confidence. But I feel things too. For you." Jomo swallowed hard. "Tandy, you don't have to." "I do," she interrupted. "Because if I don't say it now, I never will." She reached out, her hand resting lightly on his. "I'm not like them," she said. "But I still want to know what it's like. To be close to someone. To you." Jomo looked at her, really looked. Tandy was young, innocent, and fragile in ways the others weren't. A part of him wanted to protect her. Another part, darker, restless, wanted to give in. Slowly, he reached up, his fingers brushing her cheek. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. They sat there in silence, their hands joined, the firelight flickering between them. And in that moment, Jomo knew. This wouldn't end with Mama Ceci or Lina. Tandy was waiting. And soon, her time would come. The days in Kibula had grown hotter, and so had the tension in the compound. Jomo, once carefree and light-hearted, now moved with heavy steps. His eyes flickered with worry, his thoughts no longer filled with desire, but with doubt. He had crossed the line with Mama Ceci. He had given himself to Lina. And Tandy, sweet, innocent Tandy, was no longer untouched. He had felt powerful before. Desired. Needed. But now, he felt something else. Trapped point one morning, Tandy didn't come to the kitchen. She didn't help with water. She didn't sing like she used to. Jomo found her sitting alone under the mango tree, her face pale, her hands trembling. "Tandy, are you okay?" he asked, kneeling beside her. She looked at him with fear in her eyes, then quickly looked away. I think something is wrong," she whispered. Jomo's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" Tandy's eyes filled with tears. "I haven't bled in 2 moons. Her words struck him like thunder. No, it can't be." Tandy stood, wiping her eyes. "I'm scared, Jomo. What if I'm with child?" Jomo couldn't speak. His mouth went dry. His heart pounded. This couldn't be happening. That same day, Mama Ceci found him in the courtyard, her face tight with worry. "Jomo, I need to talk to you." He followed her into the kitchen, his stomach twisting. "I've been feeling strange," she said, avoiding his eyes. "I thought it was nothing, but now I know." She placed a hand on her stomach. "I'm pregnant, Jomo." The room spun. "No. Mama Ceci, are you sure?" She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't expect this. I thought I could control it. But now." Jomo staggered back, gripping the wall. 2 women. 2 pregnancies. Before Jomo could breathe, Lina appeared, her face pale, lips pressed tight. "You look troubled," she said. Jomo didn't answer. Lina stepped forward. "Don't say a word. I already know." Jomo looked up, confused. "I'm late too," she said simply. "And I feel it." Something is growing inside me. Jomo's legs gave way, and he sat on the floor, his world crumbling. 3 women. 3 lives. One mistake. As night fell, the compound became silent. No laughter. No singing. Just the sound of the wind and Jomo's heartbeat echoing in his ears. He sat alone in his room, his head in his hands. What have I done? He whispered. He had chased pleasure, touched every hand that reached for him, enjoyed the thrill of being wanted. But now, the weight of fatherhood, of responsibility, of shame, was too much. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. He had no answers. Only fear. Before dawn, Jomo packed a small bag. He moved quietly through the compound. No one saw him. No one stopped him. The path to the city was long, but it was the only place he could go. As he walked away from the compound, from the 3 women carrying his children, Jomo's heart ached. He wasn't just running from them. He was running from himself. The path to the city stretched before Jomo, long and dusty. His feet moved quickly, but his heart was heavy. Behind him, he left a compound full of women, 3 of them carrying his child. In his mind, their faces haunted him. Tandy's tears. Mama Ceci's silence. Lina's anger. Jomo had once felt free, powerful, desired. Now he felt lost. When he reached the city, the streets were noisy and crowded, filled with people who did not know his name or his shame. He found a small room to sleep in. The bed was hard. The air was hot. But worse than the heat was the voice in his head. Coward. That voice followed him everywhere, in the market, by the riverside, even in his dreams. Jomo tried to forget, but each night he saw Tandy's soft eyes, Mama Ceci's trembling hands, Lina's fierce stare. He had run from them, but he couldn't run from himself. One morning, an old man brought him a letter. There was no name on it, only the word Kibula written in shaky letters. Inside was a message from Mama Ao, his mother. Your actions have brought pain. But your place is still here. Come back and face what you have done. A boy runs. A man stands. Jomo's hands shook as he read those words. He felt shame burn in his chest, but also clarity. Weeks later, Jomo returned to Kibula. The sun was setting as he walked into the compound. The air was thick with silence. Tandy stood near the fire, her belly small but round. She looked up, her eyes wide. Mama Ceci came out of the kitchen, her face unreadable. Lina stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Jomo dropped his bag to the ground. I'm sorry, he said. I ran because I was afraid. I thought I could leave it behind, but I couldn't. The women said nothing. I'm here now, he continued. To help. To take care of you, of the children. I don't know how, but I will learn. Still silence. Then Mama Ceci spoke. Words are wind, Jomo. Show us in action. Days turned into weeks. Jomo worked harder than ever, fetching water, cooking meals, helping in the fields. He cared for Tandy, brought her food, comforted her in the night when she was afraid. He walked beside Mama Ceci, learning from her, listening instead of speaking. He earned Lina's respect, not with gifts or sweet words, but with steadfast presence. Slowly, the walls of mistrust began to fall. The compound changed, not back to what it was, but into something new. A place of healing. Months later, the first baby was born, a girl. Jomo held her in his arms, her tiny hand grasping his finger. Tears filled his eyes. This was his child, born from recklessness, but also from love. He looked at the women who had once desired him, who had suffered because of him, and now stood beside him. Jomo had returned not as the only man, but as a true man. He had learned that desire is easy. but responsibility, that is the weight of manhood. And he carried it now, not as a burden, but as an honor.